All right, folks, this is Deke McClelland, and I am going to be discussing Generative Live. Q&A. If you've got questions, just let me know. Here inside Photoshop Beta 24.6 and later. And I'm going to be doing a lot of comparing of Generative Fill with the kind of tools that we've had inside Photoshop, including ContentAware Fill and Healing. So imagine I'm looking at these lambs from the Dreamstime image library. You can find out more about them in the description. And I want to get rid of this post, whatever it is, going through the central lamb's kind of neck. And so what I would normally do, right, is grab the spot healing brush is probably the best way to go. And then I would just paint in this area, but I would do so on an independent layer so as to be non-destructive. So I'll just create a new layer and I'll call it healing, let's say, and then I'll click OK. Now notice that I've got sample layers turned on up here in the options bar. Type is set to ContentAware. That's very important. I'll kind of explain what ContentAware is in just a moment, but first I'm just going to kind of paint around the lamb's ear right there and up all the way. And you want to paint the entire area that you want to heal plus a little additional, as I've done here, typically. And notice what that does is it kind of extends the ear in addition to doing a nice job of healing up above, and then presumably you would just like paint some more and hope for better results. Now, I've created this like intense diagram for you. I think you'll really appreciate it. I spent hours on it. Notice this, what we're seeing right here is healing and ContentAware. Diagrammed in color. So we've got ContentAware in blue, by the way, and we have healing in green. And so when I was just using the spot healing brush right now, I'm doing a combination of both. So the the healing portion of spot healing is looking at this area, this dotted line around my brush stroke. So the blue thing also indicates the brush stroke, just to make things confusing. And then it takes that information around the brush stroke and it bleeds it in essentially into the brush stroke. Whereas ContentAware is looking at stuff that's well outside of the brushstroke and bringing that information in. The arrows indicate generally how things are going. ContentAware is really zigzagging all over the place. It's a little smarter than my diagram indicates. Anyway, I'm going to switch back over to this guy, and then I would presumably paint down here in order to heal that region away as well. And as you can see, I'll just go ahead and zoom in here a little bit. You can see that we are seeing repetition of detail. That's going to happen with ContentAware because ContentAware is happening inside the current image. It doesn't have to be the active image necessarily, but it is where the spot healing brush is concerned. So it's looking at It's basically has to duplicate. By definition, it has to duplicate stuff that's going on inside this image. Whereas Generative Fill does not. So I haven't done anything that's going to damage this image. So I'll just turn that healing layer off. And I'll click on the background again so it's active, just so I can show you how this might compare to the ContentAware command that we've become so familiar with. And I'll just go ahead and select the lamb's ear into the post. Now, you could be really accurate and use like an object selection tool or something like that so that you don't mess up the hairs. But if you do that, then you're not really going to give ContentAware the hairs it needs to work with either. So it's a little bit of, you're gambling is essentially what you're doing. So I'm just going to go ahead and select a little extra like so, maybe even a lot extra. I'm shift dragging, by the way, just with the lasso tool. Nothing fancy. And then I'll go up to the edit menu and choose ContentAware Fill. Now, one of the things about ContentAware Fill that I think is really inexplicable, it shouldn't be this way, is it has to be a pixel-based layer. In our case, the background, the flat background. It can't be a smart object, for example, and you can't be hovering over the layer, so it can't see the composite view. That's terrible, in my opinion. But anyway, so it's a limited command, but I'm going to choose it. And then it brings up that big, enormous kind of modal workspace, if you will. Now notice, sorry, I want you to see that there is an additional document option here inside Photoshop Beta that you can take advantage of. So if you had a different document open, you could heal from it instead. I'm not going to do that, but that is a new feature that is completely obliterated by Generative Fill. I mean, this feature hasn't even been out in regular old Photoshop. It's only in the beta version, and yet it's already been eclipsed. But anyway, I'm going to click right here. Well, I'll go ahead and sort of scroll this guy over manually. What we're seeing is the area that's going to get cloned, right? And so I don't want to clone the lamb into the post, so I'll just paint this stuff away, including the ear. But that doesn't necessarily really help what we're seeing over here. It's better than it was before, but notice that we are seeing, I'll go ahead and scroll in here. It's a little bit tricky to work with these two different views of the image. It's just a clunky feature, frankly, the way it is. But anyway, we are seeing those hairs go away. And if you wanted to try to do a better job, you can try things like color adaptation, and that may end up doing a better job on the grass. Grass actually looks pretty good. The background looks pretty good. This little area above the ear is not looking too good. And then you can just click apply, and then go back here and try very high and click apply, and then compare the two if you want to, because every time you click apply, you're adding a new layer, thanks to the fact that this thing here is set output to new layer. Anyway, I'm just going to click OK because I'm not really going to tolerate this feature. You'll see it's going to get so much better, but I'll just click off, and that's kind of, what we've got now, thanks to CAF. I'll even name it. And so it's doing a better job than healing did, the spot healing brush, but it's not doing the best possible job ever. What we would have to do is go back and kind of mask the results using a layer mask, and that might actually get us the effect we're looking for, but it would take some time. And then oftentimes what professional photographers prefer to do is get the clone stamp tool involved, and clone stamp just clones. It doesn't do any healing or content aware fill. So, that can prove useful compared with generative fill. All right, so I'll just go ahead and turn off what we've done so far. Click on the background to select it, just to make sure that we're, working from a good spot. And then I'll just switch back to the lasso tool, and I will draw that tedious little lasso again, and then I'll shift drag into this region. So I'm selecting well into the hair in order to get as much detail as possible, just so Generative Fill has a lot to work with. Now, it's doing a lot of the same stuff, by the way. It is, back to my intensely groomed diagram, it is doing the same thing in green that we're seeing. So imagine the brush stroke or the selection outline. So that would represent the selection outline in our case. And it is doing that same thing where it's examining outside of the selection outline. So it's going out a few pixels. Exactly how many, I have no idea. I do not think it's a fixed amount, by the way. But instead of doing this content aware stuff where we're seeing the blue arrows going inward from the active image, it's using information generated by Firefly. So it's actually reaching out to Adobe Firefly in order to do some image generation based on the image itself. Now, what's really fascinating about this to me, part of it anyway, is that if you go down here, you'll see that we have, what's going on? Do I have distractions? Oh, this is awesome. I can't believe how good Generative Fill is. I totally agree. King Zero. That I am absolutely, I'm very happy with it. It's not perfect, but it is, it's better than content aware fill. That's for sure. Anyway, I want you to see right here that the width is 4,000 pixels. The height is 2,600 pixels. That, you multiply those two values and you get somewhere in the neighborhood of 10.5 megapixels. And I mention this because by photographic standards, that's not super high res. My iPhone captures 48 megapixels, but the thing, I'm not bragging, I'm just saying that is a point of, as a metric. And that's because Firefly is generating something like 2 megapixel images when it's actually generating an image from a prompt. And this is true of some of the other stuff too. Even I think Midjourney and Stable Diffusion are maxing out at about 4. But where this stuff is concerned, you can be working on higher resolution images, which is a real gift. Now, I don't know what everybody thinks of this. The contextual taskbar is just what I love about it. I'm going to move it out of the way, and then I'm going to add to the selection, and usually it likes to move closer. If you create some text, it'll jump in on the text. So it's kind of like this little puppy dog that keeps wanting to trail you around. It's very irritating, actually, but it's handy. I don't know that it should be moving so much. You can close it, I should say that. We've got hide bar, but we also have generative fill. I should get to the point. So I'm going to do so, and then I'll go ahead and bring up this stuff that I've created. Well, I could. These are the wrong prompts, so that's not going to help me. I'll just badly type that we have some lambs in a field. And, well, that's all I'm going to give it. And click generate and see what it comes up with. And then we are going to get a progress bar. Now, I like to mention this in part because I can't do anything about it. I can't even move it, but as things stand now. But it is reaching out to Firefly. It's actually reaching out to that model, if you will. And it's getting information back, which means you need an active internet connection. And check this out. This goes to what you were saying, King Zero, is it does do brilliant results. Now, it did sort of add a detail up here, which I think is interesting and also plausible. Don't know what that would be. But what I really just love about this is how it's come up with new hair. And it is trying to match the hair and the grass as well. Now, we do, over here in the properties panel, you can see that we have multiple variations. Now, for some reason, even though the standard's been 4, over time, we have 3 variations where this particular guy is concerned. And I should probably go wide, but I'm going to want to come back in. Oh, good. We've we've established a new poll. That's nice. And it seems like no matter what, we're going to get some kind of poll action going. In which case, I could say, no poll, please. And then try generate. I don't know that I didn't say please, so it's probably going to ignore me. But it is going out. It's reaching out to Firefly. You need that active internet connection. And bear in mind, because I was saying, right, that Firefly is not really prepared to make high-resolution images, this is going to be applied to your high-res image, the results here, that include seemingly, sorry about that, hit the wrong key, a white pig in the background. Don't know what that's about. I don't think I want that. I am really having a problem with getting new polls inserted into this artwork. Haven't seen that behavior. Oh, there's another farm animal at work there. In which case, you might find it, beneficial to just kind of redraw the selection and try something more down here. In which case, if you do that, notice that so far, well, we're not seeing because I created a new selection outline. So far, we have this generative layer that has 6 now variations because I've run it twice. If I now click generative fill again, and it's going to ask me, let's do it without. You don't have to enter a prompt. Let's have no prompt. Sometimes it behaves better where this kind of stuff is concerned. I'm not trying to generate new detail, really. I'm just trying to get rid of detail that I don't want. I'm just trying to paint stuff away. Notice we get a new generative layer right here, and it comes up with a much better result. And we have 3 variations. I make this point because I really want you to see. I'll turn this guy off, turn this guy back on, or at least select it. And notice we have 6 variations because I ran the darn thing twice on the same layer. But obviously my new layer is in better shape. And I'm going to zoom in. I want you to see this. Notice, am I at 100%? You should be able to make this out. I'm going to turn off the layer mask for a moment by shift clicking on it. And did you see that? I want you to see it. This is a lower res image. Actually, notice that we're getting some pixel details going. This is what the original image looked like. Did you see how much more detail? It's a much grittier lamb at this point in time. Whereas this guy that was generated by Firefly, essentially, is lower res. So it's upsampled. And that's why we've got a mask, by the way, to hide that upsampling that's going on there so that we're just focused on that selection. But also, I'll alt-click or option-click on that layer mask so we can see the mask by itself. Notice how gummy it is. It's soft. And you may be able to make out, I can make it out on this monitor. Actually, I can make it out great. Oh man, I've got a new display. I'm really happy with it. But right there, it goes from very dark gray to black. And we've got this softness, whereas that was not part of my original lasso. Notice the feather value up here in the options bar is 0. So I didn't request any softness. That's softness that's being added on the fly by Generative Fill. And that I would say is Generative Fill at work as opposed to Firefly plus Generative Fill. This masking is happening locally. But you can expect this stuff that's being added to the image to be of lower quality, to be lower resolution stuff that is getting upsampled on the fly. So just bear in mind that's happening. On the other hand, it looks way better than what we're able to achieve with very little work, that is, using ContentAware or spot healing. So let's check out another example. I just have a bunch of stuff. Oh, we've seen that. So helpful. This is something I wanted to show off here because it's sky generation, and oftentimes this kind of stuff can be very useful for getting better skies than you had in the first place. And so I struggled shooting this image. The other one I didn't capture. That was Dreams Time. But this one I did in Sri Lanka. And it's a spot called Galvahara. And there's 4 Buddhas all together. This guy is very cool. Actually, there's only one uncool Buddha. There's this guy that would be over here in the layers panel. That's his dinky little facsimile of the big Buddha that's seated. And 12th century, so it's the only, I think the only art from this period of time in Sri Lanka that has survived. And so it's very interesting. I don't know if it's all from one sculptor. I don't think it is. But it's from one giant piece of granite. So what was tough about it, though, and I'm not a photographer, I say this all the time, but I do like to shoot photographs, and especially when you're at this place that you're never going to go back to, you want to get a good composition. So I ended up kind of erring on the side of too much granite over here on the right-hand side because the sky was just shot. There wasn't anything I was going to do as an amateur to really keep that sky, and there wasn't anything going on with the sky. And then we've got this just, shrubbery in the background, and also up here I've got this scaffolding. That's this protective awning, so it's very useful, but I don't want it to be in the shot. And so one of the things you can do, and I showed this off in my video on Tuesday, but I think it's worth repeating. One of the things you can do is you can go to the edit menu here, and you can choose sky replacement. And that is going to automatically replace the sky. And the reason I like to bring this up is because this is a variety of AI. But it's a variety of AI that Adobe has been calling Sensei. That's just kind of a marketing term. It's not. There isn't a Sensei. There isn't a thing that's a Sensei. As there is a thing that's called Firefly. There's an engine, a model called Firefly that actually is the tie that binds. These are a uniform group of capabilities where Sensei is just a bunch of junk all over the map. So this is good at automatically detecting sky in an image. It actually does a pretty good job, especially when you have a flat sky like I have. And then you just choose a replacement sky from this group here. And then you drag the sky around, and then you play with these adjustments. And I could document that if people are interested. There's this sky brush. There's all kinds of stuff going on with it. It's an interesting feature, but it's not going to do what I want it to do. It's not going to get rid of the scaffolding, and it's not going to get rid of the trees in the background there. Even if I were to exactingly select them, it would ignore my selection, sky replacement would, and it would just replace what it thinks is the sky. But I could click OK, and I'm going to get this group of, it's kind of like an action, actually. It creates a bunch of different layers, including this layer down here, that is darkening my background. That's darkening the non-sky, which I don't want. This is just garbage. It's not garbage. I'm sorry. It's just not something I want where this image is concerned. So I could turn it off or throw it away or whatever. Anyway, what I want to do is select this entire region. And that's a great thing about this other supposed Sensei feature that has nothing to do, nothing whatsoever. There's no tie that binds this to sky replacement. What it does, though, however, is pretty great. It will just go ahead and you just entirely marquee, by the way, the thing you want to select, which in my case is going to be the trees, the sky, and the scaffolding. Just make sure they're all the way inside that marquee. If you needed more control, then you could go over here and change the mode to, let's say, lasso. But in my case, this is working just fine. And now what I want to do is a generative fill. And in this case, I think this time around, I do have a prompt that I've created in advance. Sure enough, it's right there. And I'll go ahead and click generative fill, and then it's going to ask for the prompt, and I'll just paste it in there and click generate. I just want a dramatic sky is basically what I'm asking for. Now, while this is running, I just want to tell you this new layer that we have here. Notice I've got my big thumbnails and layers panel, and we can see that there's this little sparkly guy in the corner that indicates that this is a special new kind of generative layer called a generative layer. In fact, it is not entirely a different thing than we've seen in Photoshop before. It's based on Smart Object. We'll see that in a moment. But we do have all three of these variations contained inside this one layer. Now, I want to emphasize what you're going to want to do, right? Because it's free to play. As long as you have access to Firefly, which right now pretty much everybody does, and you have access to Photoshop Beta, then you know, you're going to want to click generate a lot because there is no consequence for you. For Adobe, there's this enormous consequence. For NVIDIA, there's an enormous bonus associated with them selling more and more of these GPUs. Did I just hit the escape key? What did I do? Or did I ruin everything? Well, I was hoping that Photoshop would crash. And by that, I mean, I was really hoping it would not do this because now I have to reopen these documents. All right. Well, I don't even have Creative Cloud open. So let's go ahead and, I could update Photoshop. Just open it. Yeah, just open it. Please. Will you? Please. I'm begging you. Will you just open the program? Yes, it will. And there it is, most beautiful splash screen in the world with inexplicably two variations on Chuck and oh, Martin, miss him so. But anyway, here we are back in Photoshop. Is it gonna offer to open the? Yeah, okay, it did. But it didn't, it kept sky replacement, which I didn't want. So, you know, again, I emphasize this is what's so awesome about having this be free to play, because now you can play with this once again. The cautionary tale I was trying to tell you beyond this could crash, apparently. This is the first time I've ever seen it crash, actually. But the cautionary bit is, even though it's very tempting to click generate over and over again, because you can just have as many variations associated with the single layer as you want. I haven't run up against any issues. Notice that's pretty ugly right there. But I'm going to try again. I'm going to click generate again, this time in the properties panel. I don't see any reason why that would be helpful. The point I'm trying to make here is these are smart objects. Now, you may know smart objects come with a lot of power. They're very flexible, but there is a penalty associated with them, and that penalty is file size. So notice down here in the bottom left corner of the screen, we're seeing the two doc values. 30 megabytes is how big this file is uncompressed in memory were it flat, which it isn't. The second value is how big the file is with layers, or so Photoshop thinks. That's not actually how big the file is going to be, because it needs to get saved, it needs to get compressed, but it doesn't really necessarily account properly for smart objects. And so if you were to keep running this, which I do want to, I'm hoping it'll be successful, because, you know, every time you're going to get a different result, and every time it could end up being a better result. As you do this, you're going to magnify the size of the saved PSD file on disk, and it can get very big very quickly. It's not unusual especially if you're having a lot of fun with this feature. It's not unusual to create gigabyte files out of an image like this. It's only 10 megapixels or so. All right, well, you do have the option of changing the prompt on the fly. So like I have spectacular evening sunset. There's no reason to think that evening sunset was a good idea, given that I shot this Buddha about 1 in the afternoon. So, and it's flat, you know, there's no sunset going on. And so just change your prompt, click generate again. That will still be saved with that same generative layer. So we're just going to keep heaping on more and more results that are all enclosed in this same smart object right here. And I emphasize that it's a smart object because, oh yeah, that looks terrible. Because let's say, let me try a different prompt actually, just so I can show what I'm thinking here. This is a final prompt I came up with. Spectacular morning light. It is one of them. And lush forest and Galvahara seated Buddha. Now, my reasoning here, the reason I'm being specific about Galvahara, because it is an historical location in Sri Lanka, it is undoubtedly associated with a bunch of images that were used to train Firefly in the first place. Now, worth noting, by the way, that Adobe used tons and tons of images for its training. They're claiming something like hundreds of millions of images from the Adobe Stock library. And that is theoretically better for us than the random image scraping that's been done by the other tools that are out there, DALL-E, if you will, or Stable Diffusion and Midjourney, which use every single image they can possibly find. And so Adobe is theoretically taking better care of its artists. I'm wondering, I'm just going to throw this out there. I'm wondering what the release between the photographers and Adobe is with Adobe Stock. Those of you who are creating images from Adobe Stock, I encourage you to review your contracts. I can't say it any other way. I think this should be an ethical discourse, and that everybody whose images are being used, and your images are being used, that's on record, that you are somehow being compensated, as opposed to good luck to you. You're not able to sell your stock images anymore, but they're still somehow getting used. So just thought I'd throw that out there. Anyway, I've got these great trees now that are available to me inside of this same generative layer. All right, what do I still have open? I don't have open everything I want. And we'll see if I'm directed to, oh yeah, I do want to show you this. Okay, let's fence removal demo. That's what I really want to show you. Is this guy right here? Yeah, that's fine. That's content credentials, totally different topic. Anyway, I do want to show off the remove tool, which is different technology. It is now part of Photoshop 24.5, not the beta, but it's also, of course, part of the beta 24.6. So it's part of both. And so I'll just go ahead and turn off that. Really, I think that turned out really good. Actually, I'm very happy with that. And it did make the wall a little bigger. You can kind of see that along there. And it's theoretically working from, Galvahara. But anyway, this won't be. I'll just create a new layer and I'll just call this guy remove, let's say. And I will switch now from the spot healing brush tool to the remove tool, which also has sparkles. I want to categorize it as a generative tool, but it's not really. It is. I'm just increasing the size of the brush here. It does do more. Where's that beautiful demo of mine? Right there. It does do more than what we're seeing right here. It's basically a combination of addressing the brushstroke, the area around the brushstroke in green, and bringing that into the brushstroke. It is also invoking ContentAware Fill, by the way. It will repeat details inside the image, so that's something to be, something to be watchful about. But it also has pattern information built into it. So not repeating, seamlessly repeating pattern. I don't mean that. I mean just basically kind of image patterns. So it's capable of recognizing hair and foliage and feathers and stuff like that. So, for example, what I could do in this image is, fill it with white. That's not what I wanted to do. hit the wrong keystroke. All right, I'll try this. What I want to do is I want to paint away the scaffolding. And so notice I'll just kind of paint halfway into the scaffolding right there so that you can see that it is going to do a smarter job than spot healing, because it's not going to repeat the scaffolding in this case. Oh, I've got it set, by the way. Do I? I'm not really seeing this. Let's just go ahead. I'm sampling all layers. Oh, this is dimmed, so I'd already selected that. Remove after each stroke I have turned off. So I have to press the Enter key in order to invoke that paint stroke right there, that brush stroke. And notice that it's not repeating much of the scaffolding, just a little bit of that edge. And it's doing a really good job of just retaining the edges. Do you know what I mean? I want to make this clear. I'll just go ahead and compare this to healing really quickly. I'll go ahead and grab the healing brush right there, and I'll kind of paint the same brush stroke, more or less the same. And I got to fill it all in, and then it's going to apply immediately. Notice it repeated some of the scaffolding, and it repeated some of the granite, neither of which we want. So what's great about this, the spot healing brush is ultimately an amazing tool. It's kind of a CS5 tool insofar as ContentAware is concerned. And so once upon a time, it was absolutely state of the art. Now it's not. And one of the reasons is it doesn't know what it's painting over. It's a dumb tool in that regard. Whereas this tool, Remove, which I'm not using currently, so that's going to make a mess of things. I'll switch to Remove. This tool is capable of recognizing image patterns. So it's not image data. It's not reaching out to Firefly, by the way. You don't have to have an active internet connection, but it is recognizing that data, and you may be able to, in other words, it's recognizing not data, it's recognizing sort of patterns once again. And so I might be able to get it to, notice I was able to fix that. So before I had this problem here, now I don't. And what the reason I mention this is because that's what we hope will happen with the spot healing tool. You hope that you can paint over a detail and have it reevaluate. But what often happens with spot healing is that the problem just compounds itself. So now what I'll try, and based on the fact, I should escape out here. Based on the fact I turned off remove after each stroke, I am sampling from all layers. This means I just don't have to do everything in a single stroke. I can build it up like so, and then just make sure that I've painted in everything, that I don't have any holes, because if you leave a hole, then you're going to have a problem. It'd be nice if you could subtract from a brush stroke. That you can't. I'm just adding to it. I pressed the Alt key, and it didn't do any good. Anyway, all right, now I'll press the Enter key, and you know what? It's because this is in a way, isn't it? What's happening here? Hello to you as well. I'm going to have to lean out of frame to read this unreadable Timnath Borman. But anyway, it's good to have you. And now I'm back in Photoshop theoretically, and so I painted away this guy. Oh, and now I'd have great luck with sky replacement, by the way. Now we're combining two completely different varieties of so-called AI, one very old school sky replacement, one new school. And that is not really succeeding in a way that I would like it to. But, on another planet, that would work out nicely. I think I'd have to create a separate layer. Anyway, this is what I really want to show you. Fence removal right here. This is the remove tool once again. I don't know if you saw 2017 classic Google video where there's I think it's a girl at bat, and she's playing Little League, something like that, and there's a fence in the way, and proud papa, mama, dunno, wants to remove fence. It happens. The fence just goes away, and then crickets. They never got around to actually making the technology, seemingly. I suspect there is no such thing. There is no technology like that. It was a demo designed to make people go, but I don't know. It could totally just be at work in the background. But let's call this layer fence. Actually, I want to call it defense, let's say. And I'll click OK. I just want you to see I've done it. It works, but it isn't a miracle. It's just really awesome. So I am going to work once again with my remove tool right there. I'm sampling all layers. Definitely want remove after each stroke to be turned off. And let me show you basically. I'll just maybe a little bigger brush. Click, shift click is what we're doing here. And so it requires some work. You can imagine that you're going to want to, have a podcast going during this one so that you can, an audio podcast, because you're going to have to look at the condor. And then you could still continue to click, shift click down like so. And you could do that all day, right? You could cover every single one of them. That's not very satisfying because at some point you're going to want to press the enter key in order to go ahead and heal away these details. But do you see what I mean about pattern recognition? It's not perfect, but it is capable of recognizing this pattern of foliage in a way that the spot removal tool is not going to be able to do. And so after tediously, frankly, it did take a little bit of effort, you can see that it made a mess of the number 45. There's so few condors left, I guess. But they're coming back, and now they don't need a fence. So the other thing I did was for the 45, I just went ahead and selected it, of course, so that you can combine, obviously, the remove tool, which is a minor miracle, I think, with the major miracle of generative fill. And I'm not going to enter a prompt. Prompts so often with this kind of stuff just ruin the results. And it can be very frustrating. Sometimes you get just these awesome results out of no prompts, just allowing the generative fill to rely on the image itself in a way that is otherwise not really possible out there, right? There's a generative fill model inside Firefly. I want to make sure that you're aware that it's now here. And that's what Photoshop is drawing on for its generative fill. They were both released the exact same day, last Tuesday. And so it's no coincidence, but it is great to not have to enter a prompt, because a prompt is going to be less exacting than what it came up with. This is just kills me how awesome this is. It really recognizes. Notice, I just want to zoom in a little further here. Notice the degree to which it's matching that part of the feather detail. This right there, see that? I'll go ahead and turn that layer off. That wasn't there. It just got added. It got rid of that little doohickey as well as the entire sign, and then it made some very credible feathers. At least to me today, that looks really credible. Check in with me in a few years. We may all be a little more sanguine about this stuff. But I also want to make it clear, look at the condor eye. That eye is covered up by the fence. And so you might even, and so did you see, I'm going to zoom in some more. I want you to see that this stuff is not perfect, right? This is the fence, and this is what it made up. Notice that it gets all smushy right there. Now, this tool is capable of generating high resolution detail, by the way. So it's not limited in the same way that Firefly is. But it is going to create some smushy stuff sometimes. And so I'm just going to go ahead and select this region, and I'll click Generative Fill. And this time I'll say, well, California condor, because it's a pretty specific animal eye. In profile maybe. Let's try profile and see what it comes up with. And then I'll click Generate. And we should get the usual 3 different variations. I didn't even try out all 3 of our variations with the previous one. Again, this is reaching out. This is doing a brilliant job of creating super scary eyes for our condor, which we could go with, that could work. Oh, look, bless it. The taskbar decided to jump up and be, Johnny on the spot there. But I'll turn on my previous condor eye, which I went for 6 on this one. I ran it twice because it still gave some beady eyes like this one. And I believe I decided that one looks naturalistic, doesn't it? I think that's what I want. So just to give you a sense of what I've done here, this is the original fenced in image, and this is the image we have now. Now I am working on a couple of monitors. AI it seems to be always terrible with text and heads, says Cascade, and especially where Firefly is concerned. So the thing about Firefly is it's very much kind of Gen 1 technology. Whereas like Midjourney's, we're at Midjourney 5.5, I forget. And at any rate, it's had some time to get a lot better. What's devastating about this stuff from a creative perspective, what is scary, I think, is that Midjourney 1 came out in, I believe it was, I want to say July of last year. And so it's not that old. And so Adobe went into this very carefully, knowing, by the way, that they were already behind. They were already a year behind everybody else's technology. Not quite, about 9 months. And they're working from a smaller data set, so they're not image scraping to the same extent that Stable Diffusion is, for example, Midjourney and so forth. And so they're constrained. And so it's only going to be by sampling more and more faces and training from more and more faces and getting more specific training that we're going to have better faces, that we're going to have fewer fingers, those kinds of things. So right now, what we have, good condor eye, because we're not used to looking at condor eyes. We're not judging the condors based on their eyes all the time. The way that you can immediately recognize people by their faces, by their voices. Just think of that. I can't tell different kinds of dogs apart. I'm sure those of you who are dog owners, your dog, and you can tell it from all the other dogs of that same breed and mutts and that kind of thing. But just random dogs, it's kind of like other people's kids, but you can tell other people's kids from each other. All right, what else do we have? Gosh, I remember getting total training. Oh, that's nice for Illustrator CS2. Thank you very much. I'm glad that worked for you. All right, well, I'm kind of at the end of what I have to show, and I kind of don't want to make this program crash again, but it does give you a sense for where we are. It does give you a sense for how much better things are going to be. It's going to be very different. I like to say 18 months from now, this is going to be astoundingly better. I think it's going to be astonishingly better is what I really mean. 12 months from now, 9 months from now, things are going to change a lot. What I like about Generative Fill, and the reason it's my favorite of these AI modules so far, is because we're not asking it to just dream up some goofy thing, that's cool and everything, but we're not trying to displace creatives. Come to that in a moment. We're not trying to create super awesome text effects. I love what I wish was called type effects to distinguish it from text to prompt, text prompts to image. But I love that, and recolor, generative recolor, that is, which is at work in Illustrator Beta now, kind of, is very interesting as well. But this is this is really practical. Being able to recolor, being able to heal, and content-aware fill in a totally different kind of way is empowering. I think that's an artistic empowering feature, and this. Text damage can be inspirational. I think it can be compositionally interesting if it's kind of like an automated sketch function as opposed to necessarily artistic replacement. But in any event, this is the thing that really is sparking my interest at the moment. And please let me know what you think. We're going to put this out as a video on demand. And I'm going to wrap this up, I believe, right now. Those of you who are able to be with me for this, I super appreciate it, especially given that I didn't announce that I was going to do this, and that's because this is the first time I've tried it. So we're using different software than I've ever used before, different display setup, and so next time I will be doing this because obviously I have no problems talking forever. Whether it's all good information or not is to be seen, but I do plan on doing these on a regular basis. I will let you know more in the future. Thanks to every single one of you, and have a great day. We're gonna go see Fast 10, possibly the stupidest movie ever made. That's what I'm hoping for. It should be a laugh riot.